Hey, what's up everybody and welcome back to News Toast. And you know what? I feel like it's been a strange week. I don't know why, it just feels like some really odd things are happening right now in the game industry. And even today, we're going to be talking about two separate controversies. One for Nintendo, and then another one for PlayStation. And then even beyond that, there's new handhelds in the market, we're getting blockchain games, the Overwatch community is just this whole big mess. And the game industry is just in a position that finds itself in a spot that I don't really know if gamers are necessarily on board for. Of course, also, the Activision Blizzard saga continues on, as we did get another update for that acquisition. Seems like the ball is starting to roll in another major region, and I want to give you all the latest on that as well and what it means for the future of that buyout. As always, though, if you do find yourself enjoying the video, go ahead and make sure to hit those buttons below, like, subscribe, and do hit that bell so you can stay up to date with all of the latest gaming news. Let's just go and move right into the video, though, starting off with that PlayStation controversy I was alluding to a moment ago. And really, I think it's become very clear by this point that this generation, PlayStation has a very real PR problem. I honestly don't know what they're doing anymore. On one side, they make very good games. There's no doubt about that. But they've also made it very evident that they're not exactly pro-consumer. And actually, let's just go and check out the latest controversy that surrounds Sony and PlayStation. And this actually has something to do with that new PlayStation Stars program, which is actually supposed to be pro-consumer. This is a royalty program, after all, where they reward you for doing different PlayStation-related stuff, a thank you to their loyal customers, more or less. It's ironic when you really start to think about it. But anyways, what's happening here is that this service did just launch over in Japan, though not all customers are particularly happy, because it's been noted that one tier appears to give better access to customer support. So I guess it's like, screw everybody else then, make their life more difficult because they haven't paid us enough money. I don't know. It's this whole weird thing that they're advertising. And actually, let's just go and check out their wording here. This was posted up by Forbes, and as you can see, it says, when contacting PlayStation customer support, you will be given priority in the chat order. Says a description for a level 4 tier pack, which requires you to buy 4 full-price games from the PlayStation Store and earn 128 rare trophies. Tier 4 appears to be the highest level of tier in the loyalty program, given that the official Star site says there are only 4 total. So, there you go. You want better customer support from Sony? I guess you just need to go ahead and pay up. And this is just the latest on Sony shenanigans this generation. Every company wants your money. That is just the truth. But Sony, they're taking some extra steps to really squeeze that just extra little bit out of their consumers. I really don't know what to say when it comes to Sony anymore. When you hear these type of things, and this has become a very common thing when it comes to Sony this generation, they're just anti-consumer, and I don't see any other way that you can word it. I do like their games, and actually I'm replaying through the Uncharted series because I love that series. I'm playing through that right now on the PlayStation 5, and I actually like the PlayStation 5. But as for the company itself and how they're going about their business, they do have some PR problems, to say the least, and this is just the latest anti-consumer move that they have made, if all of this actually, does play out the way they specifically worded it over in Japan. Let's go and move on, though, because we do have some new hardware to talk about today, and this is actually pretty interesting because Razer just announced a new handheld console. Yeah, Razer is now joining the handheld streaming console wars as well. Of course, Logitech, they just revealed their cloud streaming console last week, being the Logitech G, and now here we also have Razer, another high-profile game peripheral company, and they're going all out in terms of technology with what they're dubbing as the Razer Edge 5G. So this is supposed to be the first 5G handheld console, which is the main draw here. That 5G connection could mean you'll get more fluid and just a more stable gameplay session when streaming through the cloud. It is also powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon G3X Generation 1, which means it should have 144 frames per second support and 4K HDR HDMI output capabilities. So, on paper, it does sound pretty good for what it is, though the big question still hasn't really been answered as of yet. What's the price of this thing? And just based on what we know so far and how the Logitech G was set at $350, Yeah, I'm expecting this to be quite pricey when all said and done. Now, I've said this before, but I do think that cloud streaming consoles that runs on Android, I think that there is a market for them. I think it's a niche market, but I think fans would jump into a device like this if they're priced right. And that right now is the problem that they're kind of facing right now. I think that if they released these consoles a year or so ago, they might be in a better position. But the fact is, these consoles are now facing off against the Steam Deck, which not only can stream games, but the Steam Deck also has the ability to play AAA PC games locally. And that's just something these consoles can't do. They are Android devices, which means you're mostly playing mobile games locally. So now consumers have that option to play these PC quality games on the go for $400. So that's kind of put a wrench into the cloud streaming consoles and why their price point is more important than ever. So we do need to kind of see about all of that. However, I mean, this console does have that 5G connection, so I mean, it might be able to stream even better than what the Steam Deck does. We'll have to see about all of that, but we will get more details on October 15th. But let me know what you all think about this console so far. Are you intrigued or not? Next up, let's go and talk about Xbox because we did get another update for the ongoing Activision Blizzard acquisition saga. Obviously, as of late, things have started to really heat up. The CMA, they've made their findings very public, which I still disagree with. I think their handling of this situation comes off as a little unprofessional and how they post that on Twitter with all the emojis and the stuff, but okay, it is what it is. Sony, we know that they are not happy, so we've talked a lot about that over the last couple of months. The FTC's investigation, that's been going on for a while. Some internal documents from Brazil's investigation, that's also made its way online. But now we're also hearing from the European Commission. It's now been revealed that the European Commission is the latest major regulator to review this buyout to see if there's any type of problems here. They just now started their first review where they'll see if it amounts to any type of concern and whether or not it deserves a more in-depth investigation. Now, they did set a provisional deadline for November 8th, so we will more than likely get an update on their findings here in the next few months, but I'm just going to go and say it now. You might want to sit tight here. Do keep in mind that the FTC and CMA, which has been doing their investigations for a while, has already gone through this part of their reviews, and in both situations, they've decided to move on to that second phase, which, by the way, is to be expected. This is not alarming, it's not a bad thing, nor is it necessarily a good thing. It's really just a part of the process, and it is expected considering the size of this acquisition. It's always important to keep in mind that this is a nearly $70 billion acquisition, and while I continue to repeat that, it is important to this topic. This is not just the biggest acquisition in gaming history, but it's also just one of the biggest buyouts ever, period. So when a regulator looks at that, they're kind of thinking, okay, what's going on here? So it's going to face a lot of scrutiny, as it should and as is expected. So if the EU does decide to move on to phase 2 of their investigation, which wouldn't be really surprising by this point considering how other regulators are dealing with their findings, but don't worry, if they move on to phase 2, this is not alarming in any way, shape, or form. That's where Microsoft will come in and make their case, show these regulators what's going on, and why they think it yields no problems. Now, there is this whole dynamic with Sony going on here. We've talked a lot about this. They're obviously trying to make a big stink, saying that they can't possibly compete with games like Call of Duty, and I'm sure that they're probably going to do the same thing with the European Commission, but Microsoft, they do have a pretty good case against what they're saying. A lot of the things that Sony's been complaining about, well, as we've talked about before, Sony's been doing that themselves. They've been buying up these exclusive titles from beloved franchises like Final Fantasy. They have Spider-Man as an exclusive title, possibly Wolverine, more than likely Wolverine for that matter. And they've been buying up studios. So, you know, again, a lot of the things that they've been complaining about, they've been doing themselves. And you know, the thing about all of that is that Sony's actually the market leader, not Microsoft. So Microsoft does have a lot of evidence against them. So while these regulators might be skeptical of what's happening here, I think it will be rather difficult after Microsoft shows them all this to prove an acquisition like this is anti-competitive in that sense. I mean, they would have to have enough evidence to also prove in court. And because Sony's been doing, again, this exact same stuff for years and years, I think that would be very, very difficult. One interesting aspect of this, though, is that the European Commission might be looking into the cloud part of all of this, and then also subscriptions. The CMA, they've also been doing much the same as well, and that part of the investigation is a little bit more peculiar because there's different competition in that regard. But even then, Microsoft could show that there's a lot of competition in that area as well, whether that be with Amazon Luna. You have GeForce Now, PlayStation, they have their own cloud services and subscriptions. They've been very successful with PlayStation Plus as an example. So I mean, there's plenty of competition there as well, and because of all that, I think from every angle, Microsoft has a lot of reason to be pretty confident as they do seem right now. I think they have a lot of things working for them that should make a good case to get Activision Blizzard through regulations. Again, though, don't be surprised if the European Commission moves on over to Phase 2, which would give them an additional 90 days, and then we're looking at early 2023 for their final decision. But if all that happens, that's not the end of the world, and it would actually be very similar to what we're seeing elsewhere. But I'll continue to just kind of keep you up to date with all of the Activision news as we go along, and actually do expect several more updates over the next few months, whether that be with the CMA, the FTC, the European Commission, or maybe Sony. They have some other things to say. So yeah, go and hit that subscribe and bell notification button so you can keep up to date with all of that. Now, we do also have a rather interesting Nintendo story that's created a bit of a stir as of recent, because out of nowhere, a new game, or actually a new game bundle in this case, popped up on the Nintendo eShop, being Skyrim the Anniversary Edition. So I mean, this is like the bajillionth time that Skyrim has released in some shape or form. It's not really huge news on its own, but this time it's catching a lot of attention online, and that's because of its price point. As you can see here, it is set at $70, which has brought up the million-dollar question: is that $70 price tag that's invaded PlayStation and some Xbox Series games, is that trend now also coming over to Nintendo as well? This is a question and concern from this newest release, which is kind of ironic considering the game that we're talking about here. There should be a quotation mark on new release. It's not new. Skyrim is pretty old by this point, but this price point is rather interesting, and I don't think it's necessarily as straightforward as some people are making it out to be. I mean, sure, we can jump to the conclusion here that all future Nintendo games will be $70. Maybe that starts to happen next generation. Maybe they'll kind of release the occasional $70 game here and there on a Switch this generation. And I can absolutely see a future where we do start to see that become a little bit more common on Nintendo devices. But in this particular situation, I don't think that that's necessarily what's happening. See, what they're trying to do is that they're trying to position this release as a bundle. Now, it's a poorly priced bundle at that, but the way the Anniversary Edition works is that it's Skyrim with some extra things like the Creation Club, you have new bosses, dungeons, and things like that. Now, you can buy it separately as a $20 upgrade, which is where things start to become a little bit more tricky, or maybe in this situation, a little more muddy. And the reason for that is because Skyrim never really dropped in price on the Switch. So it's still $60, meaning that if you want that upgrade, it will actually cost you a total of $80. So by a technicality, the Anniversary Edition is actually cheaper as $70, and that's how it's positioned itself at this price point, which is not an attractive price at all, to be very clear. What they probably should have done here is they should have dropped the price of the base game and then set the Anniversary Edition at $60. I feel like that would have been much more reasonable, even though I still think that that's not a very attractive price. It's actually ridiculous for how old this game is, and in fact, it's actually cheaper on other platforms. So I really just think that this is a whole weird situation, and I don't like it personally, but I don't think it necessarily means that we're suddenly going to see a bunch of $70 games on the Switch. I think this is a unique situation just because Skyrim technically hasn't really dropped in price. I'm not sure why. It's definitely not a good situation, but I do caution assuming that this just suddenly means that we're going to see a bunch of new $70 games on the Switch. So I think that we need to kind of wait until we start to see if completely new releases that are not bundle related at that price point. So this is a bit of a weird situation. situation, though, and it's a bad price point to put it blunt. And really, I don't think that it will sell well at all, which means it's going to be a failed experiment for them if they are trying to price it at $70. But you know what? I guess we'll just have to kind of see what happens. But let me know what you all think about all of this in the comments below. Do you think we are going to start to see more $70 games on the Switch or not? Or do you think this is just a unique situation? Let me know in the comments below. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though. This video is getting a little long by this point. I do apologize. Some of these topics were a little bit more extensive than what I originally planned them to be. But nonetheless, I did ask you all, do you like what you've seen from Skull and Bones so far? And only 13% of you said yes, while 63% of you said no. So it does look like I'm not alone on this one. I've been pretty critical on this game so far. I've not really been overly impressed with what they've shown, to kind of say the least here. But it looks like you all haven't necessarily been overly impressed either, or most of you anyways. For the 13% that has liked what they've seen so far, I do hope I'm wrong here, and I do hope it turns out to be a great game. Just for me, though, I just don't think that it looks that great as of this moment. But I think Mick in the comments made a good point here. As you can see, Mick said, it's a little late to try and capture the Black Flag selling funness in its own game. And I think that's very well said, because if they would have released a game like this soon after Black Flags, they could have maybe capitalized on some of the things that made that game fun all those years ago. But I mean, here we are in 2022, and it's now set to release in 2023. I mean, you're talking about an almost 10-year gap here. Assassin's Creed Black Flags, that did release back in October of 2013. And that is crazy to think about, but Skull and Bones has been delayed 5 different times. Now, the good news here, though, is that it never got canceled, which is definitely a good thing, and I do hope it turns out to be a good game. But yes, it looks like a lot of you all are skeptical, as I am as well. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.